I think all of us have noticed that the way in which people are asked to tip has changed a lot in the last few years. Um, with us is Scott Baradell. He's a branding and consumer trends expert with the Idea Grove. And love to get your take on all of this. I guess 90% of Americans think tipping's a little getting out of hand, as it were. Good evening, Scott. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Great. Tell us about your findings.
Well, this is a survey by a company called Wallet Hub. It's a personal finance app, and it found that
I'm familiar with Wallet Hub. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, 90% of the people in the survey are not happy with how tipping has expanded to where it's basically everywhere you go now, from the coffee shop to self-serve kiosks. I mean, take your pick. You can't escape it.
Yeah, and I think that, look, when people go to a restaurant and there's a waitress coming by and filling your water, taking your order, sending something back that might not be done to your liking and all of that. Yeah, there's a service there, but when you simply order a cup of coffee and a donut, even though the people behind the counter, that they're not being paid a lot of money, every once in a while, or I shouldn't say every once in a while, probably most of the time, I do leave a tip. But there's still something about it that it's very different from what you would leave your feeling for a waiter or a waitress, or someone who gives you a haircut, and as someone who just basically, hands you a donut and you go down and you pick up your coffee at the end of the counter. But the golden goose is going to be killed here, I think, if I'm not mistaken. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you go back to the history of tipping in the United States, it started in the last half of the 19th century. It used to be something wealthier people did for service workers, porters on train cars and so forth. Yeah. And now it's kind of gravitated to where it became mainly for wait staff at restaurants and, concierge at the hotel, people that did your hair. And it used to be for, a reward for really good service. Now, of course, what it's become in more recent years is kind of obligatory. Like you're a jerk if you don't give someone the 20% tip, even if they didn't give you great service. I mean, because we all know that they account for the expected tips when they give these waiters and waitresses, for example, such low wages. And so we all know that, and we've come to expect, I guess we just have to leave that tip. Well, what happened in 2018 is, Square and some of these apps came around, and all of a sudden you're paying through through an iPad at a lot of places, and they could preset it to put these tip options up there, so you could, without saying a word, saying, maybe these places that might have had a tip jar that might have gotten a few bucks during the day, they're sticking this in your face, the person who's serving you, saying, here's a decision for you to make. And it's like, you want to leave a 20% tip, 25, or other. And then if you put other, you got to go to that other screen where they're seeing you punch a bunch of buttons, and you're like, oh, jerk, you didn't leave me a tip.
Yeah, no. So let me ask you this. How did that come to be? I mean, I've seen it, obviously, and it's even, for example, you go into you're on vacation and you go into a fish market and you buy some shrimp and you buy this and you're having a cookout for some people, and you could easily spend $100, but there's really no service. It's like putting some shrimp in a bag, take and the tip would be 10%. That's $10. 20% is $20. That's a huge tip for like a 30-second interaction.
No kidding. Well, I'll tell you, I took my two boys to get a haircut at one of these, haircut places that are just for kids. And and the person cuts their hair, does a fine job. She cut two boys' hair, right? And I go to the counter and she says, here's the options. It said 25, 30, or 50%. Those are my choices. So if I didn't want to leave at least a 25% tip on these two haircuts, I feel like I'm cheap. That's what they're wanting you to do. But how it all started, it really all started with just an easier way to pay by credit card. But then it was so easy. It was so easy to add this tip option. As a business owner, what do you got to lose? You're thinking, maybe I don't have to pay my people as much because they'll be tipped. They'll get a portion of their compensation in tips that they didn't get before. This all even though it's,
here's a dirty little secret. The dirty little secret is that waiters and waitresses would much prefer pictures of dead presidents than they would a tip on the end of a credit card bill. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll pay with the credit card and then tip with cash. And I think that they appreciate that more because it's not showing up anywhere. I had a situation maybe a month ago. Went into kind of one of these fancy schmancy ice cream places. My wife and I took our grandson in there, and like 2 ice cream cones, and they were small scoops in a dish with something like $16.50. So I went and handed a woman a 20, and she said, "Oh, we don't take cash." I've never had that happen before. We don't take cash. She said, "What do you mean you don't?" She says, "Don't you have a credit card?" I said, "Sure, I got a credit card, but I was going to give her the 20 and just be all set with it. She gets a $3.50 tip." She said, "Well, why don't you take your credit card over there and you can get some cash out of our machine?" So they had an ATM there. I said, "Well, what's the benefit of that?" And she said, "Well, it's clean." And she gave me some line which I thought was ridiculous. It's clean cash, whatever.
What?
Yeah, I'm telling you the truth. Okay. So anyway, you can put this in your next book. So I took my credit card out and paid the $16.50 with the credit card. And of course, the tip thing was there. I put 0. Then I took a couple of bucks out of my pocket. I said, "Now, do you accept cash?" "Oh, yes." Clean or dirty? Clean or dirty? So,
what really happened here is, even though this all started in 2018, 2019, it really took off during and through COVID, because I think we all felt a lot of sympathy and really relate to these people. A lot of people lost their jobs. Restaurants were closing down and so forth. And then, people starting to come back, there were worries about their health and so forth. So I think all during that time, and it was hard to staff restaurants and places like that. So I think during this time, people wanted to be generous to them. But it's been a while now. And so people are kind of like, enough's enough.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm kind of in that category as well. Look, I appreciate it very much, Scott. You've been a great guest. Let's keep in touch. Love to have you on a more regular basis. You brought your A game tonight. Thank you much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.